Can y'all hear me?
Hear you. We can hear you, Ned.
Okay, great. I'm going to let's dive into this. So welcome everybody to the RATS working group meeting. The session is being recorded. Let me go through a little bit of the NoteWell overview just so we're all on the same page. It's participation in IETF. You agree to the following IETF processes and policies. Anyone that's aware of IETF contributions that are covered by patents or patent applications, you have a duty to disclose that. As a participant in the or an attendee to the IETF activity, you acknowledge that written audio, video, and photographic records of the meeting may be made public. Personal information that you provide to IETF will be handled in accordance with IETF privacy statement. As a participant and attendee, you agree to work respectfully with others. And a few notes for meeting tips. Just make sure your video is off unless you're chairing the presentation. Mute your microphone using, unless you're speaking, use a headset, strongly recommended. Session Blue Sheet is automatically generated based on the IETF data tracker logins. Chat rooms and Meeting Echo are connected to the Jabber chat rooms on IETF data tracker. And there's more information there as well. Just a quick review of the code of conduct for IETF participants are expected to respect and be courteous to their colleagues at all times. Participants are expected to have impersonal discussion. Participants devise solutions for the global internet and meet the needs of diverse technical and operational environments. Participants are prepared to contribute to the ongoing work of the group. It's an information sheet. All folks are available, have that available. Thanks to Thomas Fasati and Michael Richardson for volunteering to scribe and take notes for this meeting. I will say, Michael, you're up, your first speaker, and so we'll need someone else to volunteer at least during that first talk. So if somebody could do that, that would be great. And then we're going to jump into our agenda. So we have a full day today, so please be sensitive to time, the allotted time for the various speakers, and we'll try to fit it all in. So first up is a RATS architecture overview with Michael Richardson, and I believe I have those slides here. So Michael.
Okay, you're going to project them. Well, there's really only one slide. There's really no change since April. We've been waiting for the Shepherd write-up to finish, and we've been waiting for the ISG reviews to start. And the design team hasn't met since April. Anticipated multiple times that we would have to restart when we got area director reviews. But we haven't gotten there, and we're not sure why we haven't gotten there. And I guess there's another new IPR claim that has been, the chairs have posted about, and I have no particular opinion about it. And so it's really just discussion of what it is we're waiting for and what's going on. And that's about it. Go ahead, Kathleen.
Good morning. So when, as Shepherd, I did the call for IPR, I did receive a message that we need to wait until around December. And so that's what happened. And now we have the IPR claim from Intel that the working group has to decide what their decisions are as to, what we do on that go forward. So that was the holdup. And so that person didn't send it out to the group. They sent it individually. wasn't really my place to put that out to the group. It was that person's place, right? So that was the holdup.
Okay.
I
Great.
apologize, but it was out of my control because that's, IPR stuff we have to address.
Okay. It would have been great for the group to know that we had to wait to December, even if we didn't know why. That would have been wonderful. Is there still some additional area reviews that we should have been getting at this point, though?
The area reviews kick in once it goes into the ADQ, because that's how the various people like Tero, who does the SecDear reviews, knows where to kick it off. So it held it up. And
Okay.
I'm sorry, I didn't feel it was my place to disclose other people's information or to put some vague message out on the list that would force their hand to say something. So it's just, in terms of maintaining proper behavior and not creating problems, I chose not to say something on the list.
Okay.
Because it was
All right.
my information to share.
It would be great
So
to
we'll
have
get there.
some. Yeah. So someone else has got some stuff on the list here. So let's move. Are you done with that part, Kathleen?
Yes,
Or
I just
more to
wanted
say?
to give the
Yeah.
explanation for your statement as to why there was a delay.
Okay. Roman.
Good morning and good afternoon, good evening, kind of everyone. Yeah, I just wanted to comment on a couple of things. So Nancy just put out something on the mailing list, I think yesterday or the day before, about the IPR stuff. And just to explain kind of how to handle that, yeah, we definitely have consensus to proceed with that document. But since we got the new information on with kind of the IPR, I just want to make it clear about what needs to happen. So what the working group needs to do is decide, hey, we have some IPR claims. This may or may not change what we do with the document, but we need to positively confirm that we want to proceed kind of forward with the information we have. So what would be great on the mailing list is not to debate what the nature of kind of the IPR claim is. It's to kind of talk about what as a working group we want to do with that document relative to that IPR claim. Thanks.
So do we have all of the claims actually now submitted, or are we still waiting to December for additional information?
I need help answering that question. I believe that there is something more coming in, and we should definitely kind of characterize and have that conversation on the mailing list.
So this is Ned. I believe that the status is that for the IPR that Intel is aware of, they've contributed that according to the disclosure agreement, which includes what the terms are. There was a request that was made by someone on the list directly to me to identify, to be able to go to the patent office directory and view the work in progress. They were not able to find it in that directory, and the reason is because the patent office has not made it public, and the patent office has said they will make it public in December.
Okay, I understand. There's usually some delay for that before it shows up in other places like Google. I mean, but that's the easiest place to find it when that happens. Hank?
So, hi everybody. So what I hear now is, independent of content of IPR claims, the working group should agree how to move forward. I read from the Shepherd document and I absolutely agree with that. We want to move forward. So what's the vehicle we are using here now? Is someone initiating a call for, do we want to move forward? And everybody is like, yeah, we want to do that. And then we just barge ahead until we hit a roadblock that is then maybe coming in December? Or are we just staying dormant until December? I'm unclear on this. I would like to have some guidance here, please.
I would say that if you can make form an opinion without having read the patent that our patent application, that you could express a view. It may be that you're never going to read the patent, because many of us are advised not to. And so all that matters are the terms. So I would say we don't have to remain dormant, but we don't have to, that we probably can't we can't form a conclusion until other people who do wish to read it are able to read it.
Okay, just a very uninformed and individual opinion here. I think the claim is about section 3 and 3.1, and I have no idea how that should work. So I am a little bit on the side of, yeah, let's just proceed with that and see how that is tied. Some IPR should be tied into that. I'm not sure that's a relevant blocker, to be honest.
I guess it applies to the layered attestation more than anything else, is what I think, but I don't know, because we don't know what the content is. Dave?
You guys hear me okay? Yeah. So yeah, I think we should proceed. I mean, I had hypotheses about what one or more patents might apply to. Whether my hypothesis is right or wrong is not the main point. But for example, if there were patents on, say, I think there's 2 of them, right? Now the total. Let's say that there was one on the composite device section. Let's say that there was one on direct anonymous attestation. Even if there was one on layered attestation, which would be the hardest because that's part of a TCG standard, but maybe. But my point is, this is an architecture document. This is not one that one claims compliance to in an implementation per se, right? You do that to, EAT and other documents. And the architecture document covers multiple different ways of doing things. So like composite device is not, mandatory. Direct anonymous attestation is not mandatory, even if an architecture document could be mandatory. The point isn't that all of RATS fits under this particular category. There's multiple, the point of the architecture was to say that, hey.
Oh, we lost you, Dave. You went mute.
Rationale for saying, I think they should go forward because I think that it is very unlikely that any patent could cover the entire document, and you could always find some way of implementing according to document that would limit the applicability of any particular patent. I am not a lawyer, but I'm saying based on the things that I've seen so far of applying to specific sections, I don't think that should block the entire document just because one section that would be narrower would. But again, I can't comment on the specific patents, but just the general rule that says, okay, if any patent covers one way of doing things and there's other multiple ways of doing things, that's one reason why it should go forward anyway. And the other reason it should go forward anyway is because this is it's not something you claim compliance to per se. So thanks. That's my opinion.
I would agree with you. Roman, go ahead.
Yeah, hi, just to repeat what I put in chat. I mean, I want to make sure there is an ambiguity on how we're supposed to handle this in terms of the process. So we have something on the mailing list saying, hey, we have these IPR claims. We need positive confirmation kind of from the working group. So feedback here is kind of great. What we're going to do is request for folks to comment on the comfort level or discomfort on the mailing list, and then we will adjudicate that almost in the same way we would adjudicate kind of a working group kind of last call sense of feedback about how to proceed.
Hannes is on the queue. And we
Hannes?
have 1 minute left.
Wrap it up, Hannes. Tell us like it is.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Can.
Yeah. So I was a little bit surprised by this development, particularly because we have made a lot of investment in the attestation technology, and obviously with our contributions to open source, and we were hoping that many of the developers, open source developers, either directly through our code or indirectly through other libraries, utilize this. And every time there is sort of patent claims on documents, it scares off developers, unfortunately. They are not going to make an assessment of the patents because that's typically something they cannot do. And in our case, we are not allowed to look at those patent claims or to make any judgment about it. So that looks pretty bad for the work we've been contributing to overall. That's my first remark. The second remark is about the timing and the way, the procedural aspect of it. It doesn't look give a or shine a great light on the work in the group when the co-chair and who happens to be document author then very late in the process contributes a patent, delays the work further. It's just not how things should be done, in my opinion. And I wonder whether this whether we should just take this as an example of not publishing the document at all, preventing further harm to the industry in that case. That's my view.
Okay, thanks for sharing your view. We are out of time for this topic. We can bring it up again on Friday. There's some open mic time. So we're going to move to the next topic. This is Attestation Event Stream Subscription. Eric Voigt.
Hello, can you hear me? Can you hear me, guys?
Yep.
All right.
Can hear you.
This is going to be a short update because we did get this adopted by the working group since the last IETF. I will, because it's going to take a very short update, I just add one claim that I put in the note. I don't think patents themselves are bad. I think it's the IPR claims actually can protect from other people down the road. What we want to make sure, of course, is that there's nothing that's going to apply royalty-wise. So just to answer, at least with a few of my minutes, Hannes's claim, I don't think it's actually, I think patents can be good as long as it's royalty-free. Right, so jumping on to event stream subscription, as I mentioned, we now have an IETF draft 00. There's a slide which we've been presenting ever since the first RATS group that shows a relationship of many of the drafts together. The subscription itself is dependent on the Chara draft, which is now an AD review. And Roman, we're done most of the comments and replying to them. That should be coming to you in a day or so. And that's an AD review, as is the basic attestation draft for routers, which Guy is spearheading, and that's also an AD review. And, you know, the working group last call, as we're just discussing, is complete. So we now have a just adopted subscription draft with a lot of dependencies that go through a number of drafts. Okay, next slide. Basically, the idea here is that the subscriber to a router or switch or some piece of network equipment will go ahead and use a RPC to say subscribe to the device and go ahead and give me PCR quotes from that device over time, either periodically or let's say whenever something changes on the PCRs. And that's really the magic of this draft, is that it's difficult to maintain freshness of quotes if you're not continually sending a new nonce every time, let's say, values in the PCRs change within the secure chip on the router. And the center of the draft really is around mechanisms to ensure that there's freshness being maintained on each of the subsequent quotes from the very first quote that's delivered that identifies the values of the PCR. And there's a number of mechanisms to do that. The draft describes those. Next slide. Now, without going through all the specifics, because you can read them, there's a number of things in the document, and I encourage you to read them as we progress it. It includes things like sequence diagrams, ways of measuring freshness, looking at an event stream to make sure that we're able to get the signed quotes from the PCRs, as well as the raw data that went into the PCRs in terms of events that are recorded in the TPMs. And then talks about other things such as filtering the events at the attester, doing a replay of those events so that you can reconstruct things later, and configuring the stream so that you only send those events that you care about to minimize the amount of information on the other side. So our plans in the coming weeks and months are to respond to any changes, if any, on the Yang model upon which is dependent, because Chara model is going to have some very minor tweaks, maybe nothing that even impacts this draft. And then once the Chara gets through the AD review and the ISG, then see if there's any changes there, then progress the IETF part of that into the rest of the process. That being that once the IETF model for Chara is done, we can go ahead and do Yang doctor reviews and other things for the Yang model for the subscription draft, and then add anything else that's needed. And so that's pretty much it. We're just going to continue through the process. Thanks for your adoption.
Okay. So we're 1 minute overtime. If there's no questions or feedback, we will move to the next topic. Okay. So next topic is CBORD tag for unprotected CWT claim sets. Karsten Bormann.
Yeah, hi. You are showing the slides?
I am.
Good. So we wanted to quickly talk about UCCS. Next slide. So this probably should, thank you. This probably should be known to most people. So a CWT is a cozy envelope around a CWT claim set. It's defined as a CBORD data structure with a tag that you can but need not use depending on whether it's clear from the context that this tag applies. The CCS actually is quite similar, but not entirely the same as a JWT claim set. So it's a map, a key value set of something that are called claims in JWT, and which we also call claims that way, but actually all these claims together form the predicate part of an assertion. And this is very useful, and it can be used to make all kinds of signed assertions and so on. And what has turned out is that sometimes it's actually possible to do the same thing with some other form of protection, for instance, a secure channel that makes clear who is making that particular assertion. So in those specific environments, you can use an unprotected CWT claim set, the same data structure, but without an envelope, because the function of the envelope is taken over by some other thing that is protecting this UCCS. And therefore, it seemed like a good idea to have a tag for just the naked CCS itself. Of course, we cannot say naked, so we say unprotected. Next slide. We actually don't have anything normative to say, because essentially we are just defining a tag for a data structure that is already defined in 8392. So why do we write a document? Now, the reason is that it's really too easy to confuse a UCCS with a CWT, and that is a criticism that has repeatedly been made. So it seems really important to point out how the UCCS is just the predicate inside the CWT, but not the entire assertion. So it becomes an assertion by embedding it in some envelope that provides a signature or some other form of turning it into an assertion. And the other reason why it's probably a good idea to write this up is that those security considerations actually get very specific in the RADS context. So it makes sense to write up how a UCCS would be used in a REDS situation, and specifically what are the requirements that REDS would have on a secure channel. Next slide. So yeah, writing a document always provides some opportunity to do little things at the side. And one thing that came up but hasn't been incorporated in the latest draft, there is just a branch on the repo for that. We could actually provide a CDDL specification for the CWT claim set. The CWT RFC predates the completion of the CDDL RFC, so at the time it requires some special dance to have CDDL in a normative document. And we could fill in that gap now, which would make it easier to use CWT in general, not just UCCS. So this is one thing that we are proposing, but that we might still agree not to do. Then we would just do another document and have to find a home for that, and it's lots of overhead for very little gain. The other suggestion that has been made is that we could use this as an opportunity to do a grand unification between JWT and CWT, and yeah, this is probably not what we want to do. And I mean, even if we do start such a grand unification project, we probably don't want to put it into this document because the timelines are very different. Next slide. So where are we? We still have to accept or reject the idea to add the CDDL specification. We also have a review from Thomas Fossati with lots of great editorial suggestions that we want to include. So there's a little bit more work needed that hasn't happened yet, and the plan is to submit a new version with or without the CDDL and with that editing, and working group last call that. Questions?
Thanks. On the queue.
Click all the buttons. Okay, I clicked all the buttons. Thank you. So yeah, thanks, Carsten, for that presentation of the state of the affairs. I think we are really okay on the scoping here today. That has been discussed multiple times already, and I think everybody got somehow used to the idea that UCCSs are context specific, and I'm happy to see this in REDS as a first iteration, first of all. And then I think that yeah, we really have to get our backlog of comments done. And Thomas already, I think, unfortunately for him, is aware of that. So I think it will be done in the next course of the next weeks, in contrast to our typical pace. And so what I'm reinforcing here is, yeah, we will do the update, and please stay tuned, because that could be the ID that will have a working group last call. Thank you.
Lawrence is on the queue.
Yeah, hello. I just my presentation that's coming up next has a whole bunch of stuff in relation to that. So that's all I wanted to say. Is I have a lot more comments coming soon.
Okay. Anybody else on the queue? All right. So looks like we're done with that topic. Next is the entity attestation token R11 changes. This is Lawrence Lindblade. Lawrence, you're up.
Yep. All right. Next slide. So I'm commenting here now about the -11 version of EAT that was released like 2 weeks ago. It's a pretty large set of changes. This slide here shows the kind of planned contents of an EAT, just the areas where the claims are. Different areas for different claims. I'm kind of pointing out down at the bottom is a little different than before in that yellow box down at the bottom is claims that are suitable for attestation results. So one of them is the DLOA, which I presented at the last meeting, and then there is verification results, and then overall verification results and software measurement results are also claims. The overall verification results is not in the -11 draft. Next slide. So waiting for next, there we go. So you can see the blue arrows are indicating where work was done on the -11 draft, so a fair number of areas. Personally, I think all of this is ready for last call. So the only things that are, this shows a little bit of a couple areas where maybe there's some comments about whether it's ready for last call or not. But personally, I think that it is all ready for last call. So I'm going to go through, yeah, let's go to the next slide. So one of the, this is a slide I've been presenting for a while, that work was needed to unify terminology with the RATS architecture and remove a lot of the text that was there before there was RATS architecture. Some of that text is like 3 years old, so that's all done. We rely on RATS and CWT, RATS architecture and CWT for verification procedures, so that was removed. There's a lot more examples. So that was a big chunk of work that's done. Next slide. So kind of this is the laundry list of changes that were done in the -11 draft. I'm going to kind of go through and speak to them one by one. I don't have details on each one, but I don't think that's necessary. So first of all, the technology is now, or the terminology is now consistent with the RATS architecture and CWT and GWT documents. I removed the operating model procedures, and that now there's a reliance on the RATS architecture, CWT and GWT documents for the operating procedures. I added a claim for simple software name and software version as an alternative to having a COSWID to describe the software. COSWIDs have are fairly large and complicated when you just want a software name and software version, and COSWIDs are not available in JSON. So that's why that's there. There's the DLOA's claim that was presented last meeting, so that's all in there in detail. There is a software results claim. So this claim is the description of the for attestation results that describes the results of comparing a software measurement to the expected values. That was, I believe, discussed last meeting as well, but wasn't in the document. So now the OEM ID claim was improved. It's clarified that it's only for hardware. It wasn't clear that that's what was the case. It allows use of the PIN, the private enterprise number. Also allows a randomly generated OEM ID claim. which can be a hash of something else. So then there's a lot more examples. The LAMP examples are all filled in detail. There are several COSWID examples in there. They verify against, most of them verify against the COSWID CDDL. So the whole document builds where the examples in diag format are verified against the CDDL in the document and CDDL pulled in from COSWID and SUIT. There's also an example of a measurement and a detached EAT bundle, which I'm going to talk about in a slide or two here. Okay, so now it has CDDL in there now for a claim set. This is the same as the claim set that Karsten was talking about. I'm going to go into detail on that in following slides. It defines a UJCS, the JSON equivalent of a UCCS. This is what Karsten thought we should not define. I put it in the document to have a clear articulation of it. So I actually, I see you see the comments here. I'd actually would appreciate it if you guys let me finish and go through a lot of this before you jump to conclusions and things. That would be, I think that would be really helpful to see what I actually have to say about this before you are going there. There are a bunch of clarifications and improvements on nesting of one EAT inside another. That and the work on detached EAT bundles actually drove me to a lot of the structuring of the CDDL to get that all to work and to validate. So it's to me it's kind of a it's a real nice goal here to be able to write the CDDL for the whole specification and then have it automatically verify against the diagnostic example. So that really kind of proves out both the examples and the CDDL in the document. Okay, next slide.
So those are the slides we had. I don't know if there are questions or comments we want to jump to.
Hang on. What happened to the Deb slide?
That's in the next. That's in the next batch. If you want to jump to that, we can do that.
Yeah, Yeah.
Okay.
I said many times that this is where I wanted it. Oh, okay. Yeah. No. This is okay. So this is the Deb slide. So this is still part of the -11 changes. And so I'm still in my first block of work here. Okay, so a detached EAT bundle. The basic, I'm only going to introduce the topic here briefly, just to get you, so everybody kind of has some idea that it exists. I don't want to have a long discussion about it. I don't think there's time for it. So on the picture on the left shows an EAT, which is some claims, a claim set, as Carson, I believe, says a CCS, if it's CBOR format, which has the COSE headers, the COSE payload, and a COSE signature. So then if you look at the COSE payload, there's the claim of UEID and nonce, and then there are submodules in the there's a submodule section, and one of the submodules is named XXX, and it has a software name and a software version. So what detached here is that you can take the claim set for XXX, the submodule, which is basically a CCS or a CBOR map that has the two claims, and detach it so it goes outside of the EAT. And in this particular, and then what goes in the submodule section is a digest of that, or a hash of that that claim set. So you're in detaching you're able to take the claim set and transmit it outside of the EAT in a some other way. So there is the detached EAT bundle is a way to take the EAT and the detached claim set and send it together. You do not have to send it together, but defined a way to send it together. So the reason why you might do this is it allows you to build a smaller attester that basically can be kind of like an attestation hardware block, where the claims are built outside of the attestation block, and then the claim set the hash of a claim set can be fed into the attestation hardware block through something like a PCR that a TPM has. Basically, when I for a long time I've thought that it would be a good thing to have to be able to build such a hardware attestation block that does EAT in EAT format. So this is the way to do that. So I don't want to spend a huge amount of time having the discussion on that right now. There wasn't really time in the agenda for that. So and it's not my top priority to get through that. It's more the JWT issue discussion is more important to me here. So that's detached EAT bundle. So you can go look at that in the latest draft. So that is it for my first part. So I think we can move on to the next part here.
Okay, so the next topic is EAT topics in general. So we can move to that if you like. There is one person.
Hold on. I see Dave Thaler on the queue. I didn't know, Dave, if you had a question. We have 2 minutes left on this slot, so.
Yeah.
I do have a question, but you're free to tell me if you'll cover it later, but I suspect not, because my comment is, so first of all, I do want to say I like what you did with the submod stuff, so I think that's very useful. Thank you. The comment that I had was, you had the slide that had all the green stuff saying ready for last call. So I'll repeat my comment now, along with a thank you for another change that you made. I think the document is ready when this is a personal opinion, when it also meets the TEEP requirements. And since I've mentioned this at the last 2 IETF meetings, I'll mention it again, that the TEEP architecture had 5 requirements for things that were not in the old EAT spec. I had asked, can we merge those into the main document and out of the general section of Hank's draft suit RATS claims, because they're not specific to TEEP or suit, they're just general things. One of those was version, and so you mentioned you added software versions. Now you have both software version and hardware version, just as separate claims. And so I think that one is now checked. So thank you for adding that. I think that checks off that, and I think that obsoletes what Hank you had in the version claim there. There's 4 other ones that I have not seen in there, and so my question is, and you may not have an answer right now, is there already some other way to do those, or do you plan on adding those? Because I think that's what would block going to RFC, in my opinion. Those were device identifier, vendor identifier, class identifier, and component identifier in Hank's document, and the TEEP protocol is referencing those right now, as well as referencing version, but I'm happy to update that to point to software version now that you have that in there. So.
Yeah, so I wrote some emails about that. I had some comments about that, and I don't remember what I wrote right now in detail. I know I thought some of them were very much suit specific and not lined up with general stuff in EAT.
Those 4 are ones that are not suit specific. There's other ones that are, but those 4 are ones that we'd all argued, including on the list discussion a year ago, that none of those are suit specific.
Well,
There's other ones that
I'm
are,
not,
but I'm talking about
I'm not
those four in
sure.
particular.
The detailed discussion of some of those things, I think we need to go back to that discussion and
Okay. So just
close it out.
queuing up, but I don't think it's ready for last call, in my personal opinion, until those four are either in there or until there's an argument that says there's already something in there that covers those four requirements. So that's my opinion. So, and I see Hank is in
Okay.
queue, so maybe he has a different opinion. So,
Hank?
Yeah, hi. So probably not different, but these kinds of identifiers and identities we are dealing with in that's of course on multiple conceptual messages, and one of these is the reference integrity manifest, the concise one. So I think we can borrow semantics from there. What I really like to have is to don't see that semantics change anymore, because we took like a year with several, let's call them hardware root of trust stakeholders to get them right. And so, so if you want to borrow them, maybe that's not for the current EAT IT, but we can of course, I think, either include a notion that, and these can be these claims for EAT, please add them to CWT registry, or do another ID that says, okay, and these are about identities of various things, and now we have this ID that ties it all together. So again, I wouldn't want to stop EAT progression here, but I want to say that we have several identity-related claims that I think that are working out quite well. And we're happy to have.
Yeah, my request here really is for engagement. I think that's the most important thing. I feel like I haven't had comments about a lot of this stuff, and people haven't read them or and stuff. So please, like Gary said, file issues and follow up with the comments. I mean, that's what I think is really important here.
Yeah, the thing is that we are not working on EAT here. We are working on the other side of the things that's coming from supply chain and endorsements and such. So yeah, our direct need is not to file a issue on EAT, but maybe we should align anyway. So the synchronization is, I think, key. But I would not put onus on one of the parties to jump into the pool of the other. So maybe we should join in some design meetings here, I think.
Okay, I think we're out of time on this discussion. If we have time during open mic, we can continue that discussion there. But I think we need to move forward.
Yeah.
So next topic is also Lawrence.
All right, so I'm going to talk about these three things here. CDDL for a claim set that is for both Stibor and Jason. Talk about UJCS and talk about nesting EATs. Next slide. So I believe there is quite general agreement that CDDL can be used to define stuff that is both to encode in both JSON and Stibor. Appendix E says how to do it. I see lots of other protocol defining drafts doing it now. There was an email discussion and there was consensus on that. I see Stibor and JSON will coexist for a really long time. I mean, Stibor has the compactness that JSON doesn't have, and JSON is used very, very broadly in backends. Next slide. So we have, I mean, my sense is that there is agreement that EAT and all the EAT claims are to be in both Stibor format and JSON format. So EAT is either a CWT or a GWT. My understanding is that there's consensus on that. And that's what's been in the document for a long time now, a couple of years. There's been no objections to that, and it's kind of been the way of proceeding. Karsten?
Yeah, I just wanted to point out the difference between what other documents that define both CBOR and JSON representations of the same thing do, and what you're trying to do here. CWT was never designed to be a mirror of JWT. So these are two different standards, where CWT just was able to borrow a lot of stuff, which is nice to get the thing kickstarted. But there are also things that are CWT specific, and it will, in general, not be possible to have the same CDDL for everything that is in CWT and everything in JWT, because they are not the same thing. And so I think we need a slightly different approach to solving the formal description issue for CWT and JWT. And I would love to find a good way to do that, but we first have to give up on the premise that these two are just interchangeable. Really, they aren't.
So I'm looking for. I mean, I can understand to some degree what you're saying. I don't know exactly what you're seeing as the difference here, but I understand that. I'm kind of looking for a solution to be able to do what I thought we were agreed on doing in EAT, where EAT was both, could be either a CWT or a JWT. So I'm open to solutions here on how to do this, other than what I've done. So I put, there's a bunch of stuff in the -11 draft. There was stuff in the -10 draft and the -9 draft for all of this before. The stuff in the -11 draft is much improved, and it's working with validation in a lot of good ways. So I'm going to continue on here, and because some of what I'm doing here is kind of problem statement and describing a solution that I've come up with, and then let's see what comes out of that. So a claim set, I mean, that's the sort of the core of a UCCS. Karsten referred to this as a CCS. So I've defined CDDL for a claim set, and I'll show it in a few slides. So a claim set is basically a group of label value pairs that it pertain to a device, a subsystem, a transaction, a result, something, right? Both CWT and JWT revolve around a claim set. They're both groups or a label value pairs. Karsten referred to that as an assertion. So a claim set is it's a convenient unit of conveyance between roles and actors. I mean, if you have some things to say between this role and that role, putting in a claim set works pretty well. The other way to look at it is that it is a really useful structure to sign and or encrypt. So the payload for Jose or Jose. So this part seems largely in common between CWT and JWT. So seems very useful to have CDDL for a claim set. And that seems like that can mostly work for both CBOR and JSON. The definition, the CDDL for claim set is the same in CBOR and JSON. I'll get to that in a little more detail. So then you go off and define all the individual claims in CDDL, and they just plug right into actually using a CDDL socket. They plug right into the claim set CDDL structure. So that's when you're constructing claims, you write them in the CDDL to plug into the claim set structure. When you want to have when you're designing a protocol that needs to have a claim set in it, then you just refer to claim set, and then you can just use all the off the shelf use that off the shelf, and even non-attestation protocols could do this. And then you're just writing CDDL once for JSON or CBOR. Karsten, go ahead.
Yeah, I agree that when you design new claims that are designed to be both in JWT and CWT, it's certainly a relief to only have to write the CDDL once. So I think that's a good thing, and developing some standard convention agreed way to write the CDDL is definitely a good idea. So I'm with you on that. I'm just not sure that we can retroactively apply this to things that are already out there.
Yeah. Okay. Then with submods and nested tokens, it became interesting to nest one claim set in another. So having the to write the CDDL for that, I mean, I needed to have the CDDL for a claim set. And I'm gonna tell you why I even want to put CBOR claim sets inside JSON claim sets and vice versa. Next slide, please. Okay, so here's the CDDL for a claim set. The important part is the first line there. So a claim set is a map, or the first entry in that map is a plug claim set claims, where you plug more claims in. So then, and the second line there, with the dot feature control, that's a kind of a catch-all to make sure that anything that is not defined in the socket is in the right format with the label. But your primary thing is the CDDL for claim set claims. So then what you do is when you define a claim, in this case, I'm giving an example of the subject claim from both CWT and JWT, which is just a text field. You write that line in the second box there where you say / equals label equals greater than text. So that's the definition of a claim. So if you're off inventing claims in some other document in suit or something like that, you're basically writing things that plug into that socket that look like that. And then because labels are integers in CBOR, or you really want them to be, that's kind of the point, you wind up with assigning the label twice. You can actually assign it with / equals as well. So the label can be either the integer or the text string in JSON. Next slide. So here's the CDDL for the 7 claims in CWT and JWT. The one place there was an issue is that the CTI and JTI claim in its text in JWT and bytes and binary in CWT. So this is definitely an issue between the two. I don't have a solution for it. It's also an issue generally where a claim in CBOR is bytes, a byte string, and it needs to be base 64 encoded in JSON. And this comes up as an issue with the CDDL validation tool. So kind of been skipping around that one, but that's an issue I was kind of looking for some solution to. Next slide.
There's Hank's on the queue, by the way.
Oh, okay, sorry, I keep switching between the. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, actually, that's just going in line. So sorry for interrupting. So yeah, but you're bringing up the good arguments here. So I would also not have a good solution how to deal with bytes. And if you're going into the text space, that seems to me that, yeah, as Seaworth the Super said, there might be a predominant way to express this, and then you transcode it down to JSON. It could be possible, but let's not talk about this. So yeah, but sorry for being in line. So just please continue.
Yeah. Then now that there is, I mean, this is the CDL. This is all taken directly from the -11 draft. Now that we have a CDL for a claim set, we can write the CDL for a UCCS, and that's really simple. UCCS is either tagged or untagged. If it's untagged, it's just a claim set. If it's tagged, it's a claim set with a tag. So I believe that lines up similar to what Karsten presented. Next slide. For UJCS, the kind of equivalent of a UCCS, there's no tagging in JSON, so all you do is write a UJCS message is just a claim set. This is in the -11 draft as it is right now. So the definition, and there's a definition and description of a UJCS in the -11 draft. There's a section for it. And I'm going to go into a little more detail on why I thought we needed it. But I don't feel like it has to stay in the EAT document. Kind of trying to figure out a solution to fit this all together here. So I put this stuff all together in the EAT document so we would have something to look at and work on that was all written down in one place. Next slide. Okay, so here's why I think UJCS is important. So JSON is far more widely used than CBOR. If UCCS is important, why isn't UJCS important? I mean, we're taking the trouble to define UCCS. Why aren't we taking the trouble to define UJCS? And today backends use JSON in a huge way. They have many mechanisms in place for integrity, authenticity, and privacy, usually TLS. No one is feeling like they have to use JWTs in the backend. As far as I know, they're not that widely deployed. JWT has this kind of null cipher thing that you can do to have a kind of the equivalent of a UJCS, but it's kind of a bit large and awkward. Basically, you have to construct a Jose message with algorithm equals null. So it seems kind of like, why would you do that? I mean, I think the reason they did it is because we're trying to be explicit that this thing is not signed and secured, so you should know that, and you should know you're doing something that's not signed and secured. Maybe it's the sort of the spiritual equivalent of all the security considerations that are in UCCS. But I mean, to me, that is sort of an unnecessary and awkward overhead. Attestation results, I think, are something that we're from the verifier to the RP is usually B2B kind of backend stuff. So here, JSON's highly appropriate, and people would probably look at it as funny if we were saying you should use CBOR there. That seems like a place where UJCS is useful and where we would want to be using UJCS. Next slide. So maybe some people have disagree about the first point about it not being much work, but it didn't seem too much work to me. I'm certainly not talking about going back through all the entire CWT and JWT registries and, like, you know, making them all retroactive and writing CDDL for them and all that. So just mainly the 7 claims that both CWT and JWT have. Just writing CDDL for those, because some of those are definitely reused in 8. I mean, we could even not write the CDDL for some of those. What's really important is that the central claim set document. And then, you know, if you're writing a UJCS document, I think the security considerations from UCCS would be exactly the same. Okay. Next slide. So it seems awkward to have a UCCS without UJCS. Seems like there will be some, you know, you'll be going, you know, re-encoding claim sets sometimes between CBOR and JSON. I mean, I'm working on a tool that does that. It makes all the nesting constructs in EAT, the submodules and the detached claim sets more complex. Today, people send JSON maps of label value pairs all the time without JWT. I don't see a logical reason why a CBOR claim set can be sent in the clear and a JSON claim set must have, you know, must have that JWT alg none construct. Okay, next slide. All right, so now this is getting to some of the reasons why I got to this in the design work. So why do you nest CBOR encoded tokens in JSON encoded tokens and vice versa? Why do you do that? The answer is composite devices and attesters. So you're going to have, I mean, in that there's the diagram from the RATS architecture document there. So you're going to have attesters feeding tokens into other attesters. So you can see attester B and attester C are feeding, you know, full signed attestation evidence into attester A. Now, you might be assembling a device like a car or a phone or maybe a whole nuclear power plant or something like that, where you're getting devices from lots of different vendors, and you want to aggregate them all. Next slide, please. Go back. Can you? Thank you. You're gonna be getting devices off the shelf that have attesters, and they are not necessarily all going to use CBOR or not all use JSON. And you don't want to, when you're building a composite device, that you want attestation for the whole device made up of all the different components. You don't want to have to say, well, I can't use that device because it's a JSON attester and I'm only using CBOR. You really don't want that. That puts us to the point where you need to put CWTs inside GWTs and GWTs inside CWTs. So you got to do that. So there's also the scenario where all the composite evidence might not be signed. So you might be putting the output of attester B might be a UCCS, and that might be okay for that particular architecture because of the way those devices are put together, and it's understood that attester B is producing some. I mean, actually, the whole in this diagram, attester A, B, and C could all be producing tokens that are not signed because you're relying on TLS for the verification to go to the verifier. So that's why it seems like you need the mixed. Now, one of the things I clarified in the -11 draft was that this mixed encoding, the only place it's allowed is when you're putting one token inside another. You can't, like, have a few claims in JSON and a few claims in CBOR. I mean, the whole token has to be either CBOR or JSON. It's just when you're nesting tokens that you can go switch between CBOR and JSON. Next slide. So here's the summary of the all the 6 token formats. So there are signed tokens in CBOR and JSON. There are unsigned tokens in CBOR and JSON, and there are DEBs that are in CBOR and JSON. So you get the fan out of 6 different token formats, and any one of these tokens can be put inside the other one of these tokens, because you want the full flexibility of to put stuff in. So the way the -11 draft handles this is that it uses CBOR tags. So a submodule that is a nested token has a CBOR tag, or is a CBOR tag that says which it is, whether it's a CWT, JWT, or and so on. If it's a JSON format token, how do you how do you do that in JSON, because JSON doesn't have tags? So I came up with this structure, the CDL of which is there, which is basically just an array of two things, a type string and the actual token. So trying to be as simple as possible, and also trying to be make use of CBOR tags. And you could do this simple tagging thing in CBOR as well, but I decided to use CBOR tags that seemed more natural. So then to use the same structure in both. So this nested token is different in JSON and in CBOR. I think I'm getting towards the end here. Next slide. Yeah, okay, so that was it. You can go back. So in order to construct CDDL for all of these things, which I've and examples and verify all of them, I had to have that definition of claim set that works in both JSON and CBOR. So I mean, there's a consistent hole there in the -11 draft where all of this stuff is working. Most of it is working against the examples. So I guess now is probably the time for a discussion until we're out of time. I'm sure there's a lot of comments on.
We have 2 more minutes for this topic.
How many?
There's a couple of minutes for this topic, and then we'll have 5 minutes for to cover last call, issues.
Okay.
I don't see anybody in the queue. Karsten's on the queue.
Yeah, I just sent a couple of comments to the Jabber, to the message queue. I think what you're doing here is some pretty interesting algebra on the CWT and JWT world that I think requires semantics and not just the syntax, how to carry these things around. So it's, for instance, not quite clear what the claims within such a detached thing or nested thing have to do with the claims in the main CWT. And I think it would be a good idea to understand this this processing a little bit better. I think it should not be a problem to actually put a signed message inside a claim set, because in that case it's clear what is being signed, and it's also pretty clear that the signature of the nested thing is not influencing any individual claims in the outer claim set. But I think putting information in there that is nested and even of a different format than the main claim set, that is more complicated than may appear on a first look. So I would be a little hesitant to say we already understand what that means. Tons of different claims can be defined, and these claims interact with other claims and come up with, unfortunately, relatively complicated combined semantics. What we call feature interaction in ISDN 25 years ago is unfortunately coming up here again. So you really need to understand how these things work together when they suddenly are hidden away in a hash that you may not even be able to resolve at the time when you check the main claim set. So all I'm trying to say is this needs some significant analysis before we really understand what is being signed here. And I'm all in favor of doing that analysis.
Yeah, so let's separate the semantics from the syntax. I mean, the semantics of a submodule and a nested token, I mean, those are, you know, that issue has been there since, you know, day one with submodules, and that issue is there whether we combine, you know, do both JSON and CBOR or not. So, and I mean, and there's some discussion in the draft, and there's about that, and there have been discussions about that. So, I mean, personally, I thought that was a settled issue because it has been there for years. What is at issue here for me is how to do, you know, how to do the CBOR inside the JSON and the JSON inside and then the JSON inside the CBOR, and how to do it syntactically and how to do it with CUDF. Hank?
Yeah, hi, Lawrence. Yeah, so I'm a little bit, sorry to say that I think we should do some divide and conquer here. I don't see the UJCS and UCCS converging anytime soon because it's not a syntactical problem. It's a procedural problem and a semantic problem, and I really want to have it done. Like seriously, and I'm not opposed of doing that work, but I would like to cut it out and do it in a different place, to be honest. So that's just me, maybe. But if we are starting to trying to solve this here in this document, this will take more than a year, I am afraid. So so I'm not against tackling the problem. Actually, I actually want to have a solution that merges the realms of people reading and working with something JSON on an everyday basis. But in the end, what they really want is to have something useful and scalable and CBOR, and it should be somehow feeling like the same thing. But I don't know if this idea is the right place for it, first of all. But I'm really interested in solving the problem afterwards.
So, I mean, this is all because of submodules, and submodules are a pretty important part of EAT.
Yeah,
right?
and then stay with the encoding.
Right?
Stay with encoding. Stay with one encoding, and then later on enable nesting of different encodings and semantics of the encodings and the caveats that we inherit there later.
Right. Right. So note also that in some of the claims, like the manifests claim and the measurements claim, that allows other formats that are pluggable. So you can do co-SWID, suit, and a SWID. So you can put like an XML document inside an EAT token That's and we have to do that.
As a value that is agnostic to the CWT realm, at the very least, or it's a code switch, and then you can understand the structure because you're doing the same encoding. But I think you're comparing apples and oranges. Sorry.
Yeah,
So-
maybe here, right? So
Yeah, we're gonna
I'm
have a conversation on last call issues. This sort of feels like it's the last call conversation. Do you want to move to the next segment?
Yeah, I want to one other comment here is, I mean, I hope everybody can see how I got to where I got to, and you know, if we're going to try and trim and sidestep this issue, maybe we figure out what do we do? I mean, do we give up on maybe we give up on the JSON part? I'd rather give up on that than the submodules part. And then I also would really like to hear what the issues are that are so difficult here. At least write an email and give me some idea here. I mean, I know of a few issues, but you know, Hank and Carsten have both spoke about that these issues are quite large, and I'm not sure I see that, and I think it would be really helpful for the group to understand what those issues are. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So Gary, you're up next. We're going to review EAT open issues.
I hope everybody can hear me. So this will be brief. I know we've been discussing a little while, and this will not include this will not include the previous discussion on some modules, UCCS, etc. So let's move on to the next slide, please. Okay. As per IETF 111, I had submitted materials that as part of that meeting, I didn't get a chance to present, so I had to post those after the meeting. But at that time, I said I would be classifying issues in GitHub repo as last call blocking. So far, I have not found. We have only one issue unresolved that's currently last call blocking, and I don't believe that should be that should prevent us from going to last call. Now, that's leaving aside any of the discussion that's happening on the chat window or in the or prior in the prior half hour of discussions so far. Let's move on to the next slide. Thanks. The last issue is a rather old one, as you can see from the number. It's 15. It is so broad that I'm not sure I can close it in good faith. At the same time, there's been no activity on it. It's just a general comment on should, must consistency. I do think we can close this issue, mainly because I think it's just too difficult to resolve, and I expect during the course of resolving last call comments, this will come up again. Should, must consistency, and so and by the way, just an overall comment, I view last call as the first step towards towards the long process to RFC, not the last step. And I'm expecting the document to undergo several revisions as we resolve not only working group last call comments, but AD comments, as well as a broader review, IANA, IESG, etc. So I think some people may be under the impression that last call is a last step. It is maybe the first small step to start towards the last step, but it's really far from the last step, in my opinion. Okay, let's move on. I understand the time, so I'm going to go quick. Okay, there were two issues when I submitted this deck that were unclassified. One was a general issue to fill in list for the IANA for all the to be registered claims. I don't believe this should be last call blocking. I've actually submitted a formal request for the CWT claims review for expert review on the claims that have been identified in the EAT spec. I haven't heard any response on that yet, but I expect that that's in the queue for CWT claims expert review. Then the final one was say that submodules related to target environments. Actually, I don't believe we should resolve that either prior to last call, because I would like to see what the RATS architecture experts, when they do actually review this document as part of the last call, actually say about the concept of submodules. So let's move on to the last slide. Okay.
I think that was it.
Yeah, okay. So just to be clear, I think there was some discussion in the chat window. We've always been, at least I've been under the impression that the GitHub repo is where we file issues. It is sometimes a little difficult for me personally to track issues on the mailing list. So I'm not saying we close out the issues now, but I think what I would recommend to the working group to think about is, if there is a claim that they feel needs to be added to the spec, first review the spec to see if an existing claim that's already described does not meet the use case. Second, consider whether it makes more sense as a profile, and EAT does have the concept of profiles. So there are and that would actually mean that you can actually bring in a suitable claim set for your particular use case, even after EAT goes to RFC. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. So we do have some time to discuss readiness for last call, and so there was some chat on the list of people expressing opinions that they think it's ready. From the perspective of the group that's here today, can we get a sense for who is thinks it's ready to go? Maybe we'll use the show of hands tool.
Well, so Ned,
Do you want to?
are you asking the question, or you want to have the discussion first?
I want to have the discussion. Yeah.
Yeah. So you have two people on the queue.
Yep. Dave Thaler.
Hi, and can you guys hear me okay? I know I glitched for a second there. Everybody hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, cool. Yeah, and thanks, Gary and Lawrence, for your comments. I appreciate them. And I'm probably not going to say what you think I'm going to say, but I'm going to say that I see a couple of potential ways forward that I would like to hear the working group's opinion on. This is specifically on the TEAT question I raised. I think we had the discussion before that for the class of things that we're talking about, a profile is not really what we're talking about for this class of stuff. There's a separate things that we're already having a profile for, but out of the otherwise, there's at least three potential ways forward. Just summarizing things that have come up in the chat. One is to say, well, we could have a separate document, okay, that adds some additional general non-profile specific things to EAT, and you really have to have the EAT document and this other document we got to wait for before you can actually do an implementation in certain contexts that would need the claims that are in that one. Okay, so that's one possible way forward. That's just a separate document. Another way that we could do things is to say any comments here is done as part of last call, meaning you just issued the last call in the current version and you treat this stuff, in which case we might have to do a second round of review and stuff. And Gary kind of mentioned this one, which I agree with your comments, Gary, that says, you might have multiple rounds of review, right? Last call is the beginning, not the end, right? +1 to all of that. And so that's one way of doing it. In that sense, nothing's really last call blocking, but there are times that working groups do last call multiple times, okay? And so I don't like having to do it multiple times if you can avoid that, and so I'm trying to minimize work, but that is a possibility. And then the third one, Lawrence or somebody, one of you two had said, okay, it's possible if there were non-controversial stuff to add that in there and then start working group last call. My preference is for that one if we can do that, and that's just because I would like stuff to be reviewed all at the same time rather than doing multiple rounds of reviews. And so that's why my preference is to treat it as, if you can do a -12, add in the 4 little sections out of draft protocols if you think that those are non-controversial. And Lawrence, I did see that you said within the next day or 2 you do an evaluation. That would be fine with me to defer the decision until and then talk about it at the next RATS meeting if you've had a chance to do that during the week. So that would be lovely. But any of those 3 possibilities, I would say would be possible ways forward. And I would not object to any of those. Just my preference is to do it as part of the first working group last call. So there, thank you.
Hank is on the queue.
So thanks, Dave. So first of all, any decisions, yeah, should maybe, if there's only a few days of more input to make a decision, I think that is fine, of course, especially in the course of the IETF meeting here right now. Having said that, I do not see a easy solution to resolving anything in a blob, as I think was your preference. So unfortunately, I have to say, let's get the CWAR-based stuff that was the initial CWT space out now. Maybe anchor some preliminary sockets in the document to enable the next document and do it in parallel. That's me, just one opinion. I see the point of resolving this all at once makes a better document. I really see that. Unfortunately, I don't think this will be done until the end of next year, to be honest.
Curious on the queue.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I guess one general comment following up on Dave's. We can go through at least on the TEEP items, and before hopefully me and Lawrence can turn this around with the next day or so, and we can even put out a version 12 before the Friday meeting. I believe the submit tool should be open again today. I guess. Going back on what Hank said, though, on the general CDDL versus JOT representation, well, unsigned JSON claim representation that Lawrence had discussed, would it be possible, Hank, in your opinion, to actually, if you think it's going to take a minimum of a year, to actually potentially take EAT to RFC, but then have a follow-on document that builds off of EAT that would also be its own standards track, which we do all the time. Updates RFC XXXX, for instance.
Exactly. Yeah. I think this is consecutive. I think EAT is our I don't know, basis, and from there we can build a lot of rather cool things, I think, from it, and I think we should not stop following the route or the trail that Lawrence is blazing here, but I think we should cut it at some point, because we're really waiting for this, and I like to see a good transformation. I like to see a mapping of semantics. I like to see a mapping of semantics to current solutions with maybe some frosting on it, so it's intuitive, all of that. But yeah, I think this will take time, and yeah, but I really think this is we can build the basis and add on.
Thank you. That answers my question.
Okay, so I thought I heard some interest in a version 12 before Friday. Does that imply that we would continue the last call discussion on Friday?
Can we do that? Sorry to jump in the queue.
Yeah, go ahead, Ned, and then I'll ask the question.
I was going to say, we can do what we want to do as the group, but maybe you can jump in, Nancy.
Yeah, my clarification question, Gary, is you're volunteering to rev version 12 to address some of the TEEP suit stuff, but to Hank's comment of culling out the that I can't speak, sorry. Would you be able to address that also with the version
So
12?
you, okay, so
No. To do what Hank is asking, basically turn the document into a CBAR only document, remove all the JSON stuff out of it. I think that's what I understand. That seems not possible by Friday. And I don't know that there's even consensus that that's what we should do. I mean,
Okay.
he's the only one saying that at this point, right?
Hank, you're in the queue.
Not lower my hands. I apologize. And yes,
Oh.
Lawrence, that is not the thing for Friday. I think the Friday ask was the TEEP claims that Dave highlighted, and then not the JSON.
Just being clear. Yeah, just being clear. That's all.
Okay, and thank you for clarifying.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, so sounded like there was some consensus for that. Dave's in the queue.
I just want to say on that nesting point, separately, I think the TEEP use cases do require the ability to do nesting, although TEEP is only using CBOR. Independent of the TEEP stuff, my preference is, partly for the same reasons as Lawrence mentioned, to keep the JSON stuff in the existing document. I think there are use cases for JSON, and so I would rather do minimal changes and try to get the document out sooner, even if that means that JSON nesting or something like that was in a separate document. And I say that because I don't think anything is currently blocked on it, but I think it's an important use case, and I don't think it's worth major changes to the document that might be destabilizing, which is what I got the impression from Lawrence, that it might be destabilizing. And so we could pull it all out there, but if it's going to destabilize the document or whatever, then I prefer keeping it in there. But that's my preference. But again, TEEP is blocked on having nesting in CBOR, which it already supports. In fact, the new way of doing nesting is even better. Thank you.
So just jumping quickly in here. So now we have the choice between delaying it, to be honest, sorry, and therefore not satisfying TEEP, or satisfying TEEP by not delaying it. So this is a conundrum. So I would not understand how to choose between these options.
Well, perhaps issuing on the Rev 12, issuing a working group last call will force that issue to accelerate.
Yeah, I mean, my gut reaction to address Hank's comments and Karsten's comments is all the JSON stuff has to go. It is just a CBOR document. And we'll do a JSON document later. That'll be a second thing that when we learn how to kind of work through the issues. But again, I think I would like to hear much more specifically from Karsten and Hank what they think the issues are, what's really wrong with the document as is.
Okay, but Lawrence, that should not preclude us from you moving forward with the group consensus of doing the update and then starting the last call.
Like for the dash, yeah, for a dash 12, I'll certainly add figure out what the claims are that Dave wants and add them if it's straightforward. I'll certainly take care of that by Friday. And if there is consensus by Friday that to go to last call and move forward with all the nesting and all the JSON and all the CBOR, that's fine. But what I think I'm hearing from Hank and Karsten is that all the nesting and all the CBOR and all the CDL and all the JSON is maybe not suitable for last call.
So I heard that there was work to be done but that it wasn't last call blocking as it relates to JSON.
Well, I mean, Karsten is saying it'll take a year to solve all that. Hank and Karsten are saying it'll take a year to
what I
solve that
said.
stuff.
I have a general problem with standards that start out by fragmenting themselves in a false sense of trying to appease certain user groups. But that's unrelated to the question of, can we get the semantics of all these things working together right? I think we can get these semantics right. It might take a little bit of time. I'm just not sure it should be done in this document, because it actually would continue on the development of CWT and JWT beyond what the scope of EAT is. So
Okay,
I mean,
so in the interest of time, Cabo, I hear what you're saying, but I'm trying to move forward and how we get EAT to publish, if you will. So, Yuri and Lawrence, if you can rev to a version 12, announce it to the mail list, and then for the participants, we can certainly put a call of, are we ready to do a working group last call? We've already clarified, so Dave, thanks for putting in your expectation of what should be on the EAT draft. But I would encourage and solicit everybody else to do the same thing of, if there are things missing or things that need to be addressed for us to get to working group last call, that we start putting them both on the mail list, but more importantly, as the authors are tracking it on GitHub, to start putting them and documenting them on GitHub.
Okay, so should we move on?
Yeah.
Next up is attestation results for secure interactions. Eric Voigt.
Yes, bring up the slides. This first slide is just highlighting that there's 3 drafts that last time we wanted to discuss as a group has potential overlap. This discussion is going to be happening later, so let's jump past this slide. What we have is attestation results for secure interactions, and we have version 2, and you can see the set of authors who've been contributing, as well as getting suggestions from other people on the call here. Next slide. The big change that occurred from last draft is really a split of the draft into 2 parts, and this was requested in the comments of IETF 11. The comments were, let's split the document in between the information elements that include the attestation results, and then into end-to-end implementation options such as background check or the augmented evidence. So we now have a document which really focuses on those 2 different areas. There are a couple implementations of the overall types of attestation results information elements that we're going to be talking about. And at the end of the presentation, we're going to be hopefully asking for working group adoption of this draft after we get through the intersections with the other drafts. Next slide. Just briefly, the drive behind this draft is that there's many kind of attesting environments out there, and the relying party can't support an infinite number of permutations on what kind of claims are going to be coming in about a verifier saying, hey, this is what I think about the attester. So we got to make sure that we have some commonality in the kind of information that's coming into the relying party, and we need shared definitions. Next slide. These shared definitions really have to be that the attester and the verifier have the right information elements that are documented, and defining just a small subset of information elements is part 1 of what this document includes. Next slide. the simplification of the draft is that we took all the claims that we had previously, and instead of having Boolean, like either the executables fail, the executables are approved, instead we have things like, there's executables, and there's a claim about, let's say, executables. Do we have the right binaries, the right runtime files, the right time scripts loaded? And so getting a general claim about executables or hardware or the file system or the config, this is the kind of information that is in this draft, coming up with a minimum set at this point of 8 things around identity, integrity, and confidentiality of the information that is asserted by the verifier in regards to the attester. And so that's a key there. And then the other part of the big change along that, next slide, is that we, instead of having Boolean, now have a signed integer, and that signed integer provides information saying that there's affirmation about the claim, warning about the claim, or contraindication about the claim. So there's standardized results about what was found out about a particular aspect. For example, the executables, we could have a green or affirming value that only genuine files and executables are included. Whereas if we don't find that and we find a file or an executable that has been loaded that we know is not good, we could send or assign a result to that executable's claim that is contrainterdicted. For example, we know that there are files that are not good in there. So the key here, obviously, is that we have tiers of values. That simplifies things to the relying party, because the relying party can either code against the specific number in the claim or against ranges in the claim if they just want to say, I'll accept any claims or any claims that are currently affirming. I will go ahead and deny any connecting to any device that has contraindicated claims. So the beauty of this particular way of encoding is that the relying party can either code against generalities or specifics. Next slide. And we have looked at these claims against multiple types of hardware technologies, including different kinds of confidential compute hardware, as well as TPMs. Next slide. So last thing about the part 1, it's important to remember that just because you say that something is affirmed or contraindicated doesn't mean the relying party has to accept it. This is just the normalization of what's being asserted from a claim. You might say, oh, I trust a lot more a confidential compute environment such as SGX or TrustZone rather than a TPM for an equivalent claim. So it's important that when you identify the value of a claim, it's considered in the kind of environment that it was possible to make such a claim. So you have to understand not just the claim, but the hardware source for what could be concluded about that claim. All right, next slide. So that was the part about breaking things down into various claims. There's also a second section, and that second section talks about how to take the claims that are shown in green in the middle, match it with freshness indicators from the draft architecture, as well as verifiable identities such as chip vendors or development environments or target environments that say here is the code build. And it's really the combination of freshness, trustworthiness claims, and identity, which are what would be combined together into something that would be evaluated at the relying party. And that's the second part of the draft. Next slide. And that second part of the draft matches to a call flow in the architecture draft, which uses the times and the rest of the things so that the relying party and effectively the verifier B at the far end can go ahead and evaluate the information bundle to make a decision on whether to start a secure interaction between the attester and the relying party. All right, next slide. I think that might be it. The summary. So we've gone through and broken the document into two parts, the information elements for attestation result summaries. We have end-to-end implementation options, and there's at least a couple implementations out there, including a trusted path routing that I'll talk about second, and that we're hoping that we can get a discussion on working group adoption. So this is where we are right now. Questions, thoughts?
Gary's on the queue.
Yes, hi. Thanks, Eric, for the draft and the explanation. Sorry, I'm having trouble getting my camera on. So I've read through the trustworthiness claim section a few times, and one of the things that that in my impression reading it is that although the claim values are defined, the criteria that the verifier used in determining those claim values are not. And therefore, interoperability is going to be a very difficult issue. Like I'll give let me see if I can give a concrete example. Like take, for instance, an attestation result, or sorry, an attestation is provided in the form of a token maybe that says the firmware running on the device is at version X. That's not the tip. One verifier may actually lower the trustworthiness of the device based on that, because it's not running at the tip. Another verifier may know what is at the tip and may view that the additional changes in the later version firmware are not sufficiently consequential to affect the security state of the device and may not impact the trustworthiness claim accordingly. So I'm wondering if we can't really define how the verifier is actually determining the values on the trustworthiness claims. Can we ever really come up with a interoperable specification from that perspective? At least it's useful.
Okay. Now, good question. We certainly have had discussions in the past, at least in the verifiers I've worked with on this. In the end, the verifiers like to compete based on how good they can do something. Some verifiers will say, here are the rules of which I'm going to process a conclusion. Others might say, I'm not going to actually discuss how I look at the evidence in order to generate the conclusion. It's up to the verifier to determine what level of exposure they're going to do in identifying the rules for processing. And there's actually a good reason for this. A lot of the people don't want to show what their issues are in terms of what they see as vulnerabilities, so people don't start to design their attacks to pass the test. So instead of saying, here is the exact equation to have the result, instead they're saying, this is what I'm willing to release, this is what I'm not willing to release. The goal to meet this standard is not a rule, but a definition of a particular claim. And it's up to the relying party to determine whether they accept the assertions that are made at the standard level by the verifier against those claims. There's a bunch of other things that can go along in that, but in the end, the rules for calculation are not always formulaic, especially when you have a huge amount of evidence. And we have to generalize some of the values across different types of technologies. We have many types of technologies, and trying to say how to calculate a constant value across them will not always be something that will be formally defined in an equation.
So we're over time. Can we address the next topic in 2 minutes, which is trusted path routing?
Yeah, it'll be a real quick one.
Okay.
All right, trusted path routing. We have the same authors from last time. It really is an instance of the attestation results draft. You can go to the next slide. And what happens is you take the appraisal policy for attestation results, and we take the new definitions from the attestation results draft, and we build a topology across a set of routers that is able to bypass routers that don't have the trustworthiness claims as expected. Next slide. This just talks about the means of evaluating the information coming from one device to another. And there was a question on the mailing list, can we do this with EAT? Can we do this with Yang? How's this going to be encoded? Really, the trustworthiness path routing, the trustworthy path routing draft talks about how to parse specific fields and various encodings. Next slide. And so the only thing that's really changed in the draft is that we match to the attestation results. And I think that's it.
Okay.
So we're just going to have and keep on defining, and no need to adopt this until we get a decision on the attestation results. Okay, that's it.
Okay, thank you. So next up is scalable remote attestation for system containers and applications. Kathleen Moriarty.
Good morning. Next slide, please. I'm going to provide an overview. I've done this before, but it seems there's confusion on the draft. However, the explanation that went out, but there's no overlap, but it uses EAT, is a correct summary. Essentially, this is to provide a way to scale bringing local attestations to a single remote attestation. And so, and part of this is thinking about the posture assessment use case and what's working and what's not working. With current posture assessment techniques, it requires a lot of customization on the part of every single organization. And while the standards are there and they work, that has been a barrier, even though lots of vendors have implemented it, because people don't have the expertise to deploy or have a person responsible for that level of detail. Now, what we've seen with Trusted Boot Process is that vendors, a number of them, have been able to demonstrate a trusted boot process that relies on a series of trusted or attestations working out or resetting a process if it doesn't work out. And then, the system is brought up as being trusted, and it even can provide an assurance to the hardware that's expected on a system now. And so these are aligned to NIST SP 800-193, so the firmware resiliency specification. And then it's further instantiated in TCG's reference integrity measurements documents. Next slide, please. So that would constitute a set, right? All of the policies or measurements, and you might break it down in different ways. You might have multiple sets representing the document, but having this guiding way to take a set of what's been done locally and report it remotely could help us better scale what the posture assessment looks like from a system gathering that information. And the reason is that you're not going to want to send every single attestation across the wire, because then it would just be too much data. But we have logs and we have evidence when these attestations happen locally. So the idea is really very simple. Let's group them up, provide a way to label what that group looks like, and then be able to send it to a remote repository, whatever that is. And so this draft sets up a registry so that we could define what those sets look like, so that we have interoperability across the wire and we understand when a set is attested locally, what does that mean to the remote entity? And it obviously uses EAT. It would leverage, assurance of what's coming from that host and how that was provided, but would be essentially just grouping those sets so that we could better scale posture assessment where it's possible. And it might not be possible to do attestations for every bit of posture assessment, but if we could do a lot more via this technique, that puts the onus on the vendor to create the set of what's expected and then have remediation capabilities where possible, then this is going to help all of those end entities that cannot hire somebody. We have a 3.5 million person deficit globally, and there's lots of organizations like ones that we support at Center for Internet Security. at the state, local, tribal, and territorial networks. And that's just an example because there's lots of small organizations that cannot hire resources for functions like this. So if this were to be provided by the vendor, this gets us closer to not just built-in security and provided built-in security, but then ongoing assurance to that expectation. And so you could use whatever format you need, and it would be sent to a repository, and it would just match up what is that set and how that is registered. Next slide, please.
So we're over time, Kathleen, for stuff.
Okay, I think that explains it well enough. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to take them, I guess, at the next session.
Yep.
And please read the draft. It's short and simple.
Okay, thank you. And I think that concludes our session for today. Next session is on Friday. Check the agenda to get the actual time zone that works for you. Thank you.
Till Friday, everyone. Thanks.